Emeritus Professor Judy Atkinson, AM PhD, has German, Bundjalung and Anglo-Celtic heritage. Her work focuses on healing the traumatic legacies of colonisation across its generational impacts. To Judy, youth justice means willing to listen and learn while working together with youth to help open different pathways for their future. It is a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Judy Atkinson.
It's a real honour to be here again today. I seem to spend a bit of time over here doing these kind of things and just sitting and listening. So I'm going to get into this as quickly as I can. Youth justice, prevention and detention. Not detention. So let's just have a think about where we are. Stories change according to where we see things. So you all know this place here, Cook sailed up the coast. He looked over and he saw this place, he called it Mount Warning. In fact, this place that we know as Wollumben is a story place. It holds massive stories. We learn depending on how we listen to each other. You can see two different points of view of the same thing and have a different understanding of them. A woman's place. This is the woman's place. Stories can be told, accepted from many different points of view. And so we need to listen. And what I'm going to be kind of telling you today is that we actually need to be listening to our kids, because you know our kids today in every part of Australia I know are telling us something, right? So how do we listen? This artwork is by Christopher Edwards Haynes. He rang me when he was in prison. Wrote me a 4-page letter first and then rang me and said, "Can you help me?" And I said, "No, I can't help you. But you can help yourself. So when you get out, come up and we'll do some work together." And we did. For 3 months, we walked the beach every day. And this is one of his paintings. So how do we listen? This deep mindfulness practice of sitting out in country or sitting somewhere in a prison cell with somebody, in a hospital with somebody, but out in country more particularly when I'm out with kids. How do we truly listen to them? I remember I started to get grey hairs when I'm out with a bunch of kids down the river near Canberra, and one of the girls wanted to talk to me and started to tell me about the abuse she was experiencing. It was the first experience I'd had of that, and I think that's what I've heard since then. Over in Petanjara country, it's about listening. How do we listen? And hey, this is a woman's growl. You listen now. Women out there in communities are saying that, you listen now. And we've got to listen to that. And then in Bundjalung country, hearing, listening, learning, feeling. Did you know that when we listen we have to feel too? And then we think and understand and we know from the heart. So I love Bruce Perry's work, and he said we are the products of our childhood, all of us. We're the products of our childhood. The health and creativity of a community is renewed each generation through its children. So what happens when you're going down to the prison to sit with the kids in the prison cells, to talk to them and hear their stories? And you think, what the hell happened that nobody helped this child? This is a university photo. I'm running a course on loss and grief and trauma. And without a word, somebody, like in this room, somebody got up and just walked out. And she started to come back in, and she created in the centre, like here, this. It was massive. It was a big circle. She never said a thing. She was in a trance. She had no idea, but she was pinching all the flowers outside to create this wreath. And after she'd finished, we sat and looked at it, and then these communities of care become communities of practice when we listen to each other. And then she talked about the incredible and painful, incredibly distressing death of her partner for the first time ever. She had spoken about it after 2 years, and that was the symbol of it. So that's what we're doing now. We're talking about things that we need to be thinking about. Look, I put this one in because it's kind of this is Bruce Perry's work, neurodevelopmental stuff with kids. And the brainstem, 0 to 1. How do we regulate the little fellas? How do we respond when their survival needs are already telling us something's wrong? The midbrain, 0 to 2. This is age group stuff. How do we regulate the boy with the knife? I'll be talking about that later. How do we make sure that we're well enough to walk over and not face the child, but actually walk beside the child until finally the child hands the knife to you? 0 to 3, the limbic system. Facilitate emotional regulation. How do we relate to others in a way that they know that we're listening? 0 to 4, encourage abstract thought. This is where you are now. We have to reason, we have to understand. Having children plan a menu and cook is helping them learn to plan about what they want to eat together at a school. Writing, theatre, art and music, movement and yoga. If I had another life, that's what I'd be doing. And finally, the heart brain. How do we take kids to the heart brain? It connects together. How do we listen? So prevention, not detention. Okay, the soul of a nation. Youth justice means being willing to listen and learn while working together with our youth to help open different pathways for their future, because their future is my great-grandchildren's future. Working specifically with Aboriginal youth means seeing the generational injustice of Aboriginal lives and taking the courage to look deeply into the soul of this nation that still hasn't dealt with its own self. And in the words of Billy Walker and Margaret Hayes, prevention, not detention, requires using the knowledge and the skills to build programs as we learn from our youth. They teach us every day. Even when they're little shitheads, they teach us something. If you're listening, you'll hear of that fella out there that's been dealing drugs for sex with them. Serious, I'm serious. I'm not playing games here today. We need to learn to listen. And this is what I learned to do. Shut up. Okay. Yeah. So culturally informed trauma-integrated healing approaches means creating safe places, finding and telling our stories. I love stories. I'm a story person. Tell me a story. That's what I say to the kids. Tell me a story. And they'll act it out. And to the old woman, tell me a story and I'll sit and cry with her. And how do we make sense of these stories? Naming and owning the feelings that come up in ourselves. What are you feeling right now? Because I'm starting to challenge you a bit. I can feel it in my chest. It's coming up, hey? And moving through the layers of loss and grief to ownership and the choices we can make in knowing that we're wounded, all of us, every one of us. I was strengthening our cultural and spiritual identities. I was reading something the other day about the 10-year-old child that came out on the first prison hulk because he'd stolen a slice of bread because he was starving, living on the streets of Merry England, London. That's our history. So a whole of community approaches in support of children and youth. Put them in the centre there. And we talk about education, educaring, the caring part of what we should be doing when we're educating. And schools don't generally do that, and I'm being very critical of schools, but I know one school that does. And then we have programs from our children, our youth. We engage with the parents, because in the 7th, 8th generation, we're generally working with, and I'm talking specifically Aboriginal situations, we're talking with wounded people. I'm on the a research committee looking at frontier violence at the moment. And the first place we went to was Moree-Margie. And holy moly, Australia doesn't know its history, frontier violence. We need to know it. And then we go to the teachers, the health professionals, and we talk to them. And more particularly, we have to also do research and evaluation because we need to know what works and why it works and how it works. So this happened out at a school. You would recognise it. The grandparents cried when they started to see that their kids and their grandkids at that school would start to grow. And the children became so excited at the school they never missed a day. And the little fella got up on the roof, you know, and you growl at the kid up on the roof until we say, no, get down. And he says, no, look, I can read now. He's so excited, he's got his reading book up. I can read now. Oh, gee. That makes my heart kind of go pump, pump. And we develop empathy, not sympathy, but we know the child is telling us the story. And then we go out to the parents and the grandparents and we hear the stories and we think, my God. We empathise and we listen. And the school secured a doctor to come, finally, to give us some clear diagnosis. And we started to get health and medical health services. And guess what? In a very short space of time, the literacy and numeracy levels of that school, of all the kids who have been kicked out of all other schools because of their bad behaviour, increased between 150 to 300%. Okay? It works. So we're into the stuff I wanted to really talk about, the 3 R's: to regulate, to relate, to reason. So have a look at this regulation stuff. The story of a boy with a knife is that he was in a dissociated state at the school until the principal saw him running around with this knife. He had seen his mother stab the night before, so he finds the knife as he's walking down the street to get to the school, and then he's running around. I learned something. I watched this. We were in lockdown because this was a big knife, and I saw a school principal walk alongside him, far enough away not to be hurt by the knife, but just talking, until finally, after she asked him 3 times, could he give her the knife, he turned to her and he handed her the knife with the wooden handle for her to take. Now, that's a skill I want. Yeah, I'm leaving this PowerPoint behind for you so you can read the rest of the stuff. Watch the face to see where the child is going, the young person is going, whether they're going to move from flight to fight to a reactive and dissociated, because in disassociation we don't know what we're doing. So to relate, the limbic system, the emotional, relational brain, attunement, self-regulation. This is Perry's work, by the way, Bruce Perry's work. It's brilliant. Get it. Music and movement games can help us to regulate. Changing all these forms that we have to help us experience our own self-regulation. I don't have to stamp my feet. I don't have to swear, although those swear words are quite good sometimes, by the way. I can even use them as well as most of the kids I know. And animal games. Little fellas can do some really good animal games where they're getting rid of the energy. They're growling. They're and they get rid of the energy. And we did a lot of that stuff at that school I'm talking about. And youth in story mapping. I've been in many schools, I've worked in many schools across Australia, and the Kimberleys want me to go back again. And it's called Arakoon this time too, which will be real fun. The kids have got stories. And when we do stories with them, and we sit like this, we suddenly hear where the harm is happening. They don't even know they're telling you the stories. And my stuff is, if you go out with me in the bush, you'll see I'm always sitting like this, and I didn't realise it was to remind myself to shut my mouth and listen, Judy. Just listen, and you'll hear what you need to hear. So the family breakup was an interesting one. A mum and a dad came to me and said, we're breaking up and we wanted to sit with our kids, right? And I said, okay. The first one I want you to do is, there was 2 boys and a mum and a dad. I said to each of them, I want you to go outside and find some things that you want to talk about when you're talking to each other. Now, the kids didn't know that their parents were going to separate. So the first one that comes in is a little 6-year-old. And he sits down on his chair and he puts 3 rocks, boom, in front of me. And I think, this is going to be an interesting story. Finally, his brother and his mother and father came in, and I thought we'll start with him. So he picks up the first rock and he says, Dad, when you go away working, his dad was a line worker out in the mining sites, when you go away working, you come back and you're as hard as this rock, boom, and he hits the ground with the rock. And I thought, wow, I wouldn't have been game to say that to his dad. And he says to his mum, and Mum picks up the stick, he says, when Dad goes away, you don't have a right to hit us with a stick. That's not right. He's 6 years of age. And then he said, and when you 2 fight, he picked up this tangled lot of fishing line that he'd found where we were at the time at the Haven, just opposite. And he says, and when you 2 fight, I'm in the middle of this fishing line and I can't get out. It's a tangle. I tell you what, he was a better counsellor, a better therapist than I was. So reason, the thinking, planning, creative brain. So during lockdown at the school, the kids went into the kitchen and cooked for the families, for the community. They had to read the recipes. They had to go and buy the food. Correct me if I'm wrong. And they cooked. But they started to feel in connection with their families and their communities. So in establishing state regulation, in building safety and trust, we helped develop emotional self-regulation. We moved to understanding diversity and autonomy and abstract thought for thinking about life's meaning and emotional balance. The kids did that by learning to make a list of the things they want, read recipes, make a list of things they wanted to buy, get those things, buy them, take them into the kitchen, cook, and then take them home to their families. Look, I'm leaving this behind so you can read it further. I'm going fast because I just want to make sure other people can talk after me. So I want to take you across the world now. So Derek Shyloved worked in Africa in 2007. Security and safety, he found, was the first principle. Then you have to build attachment when you're walking into war zones. There has to be justice. We have to know our roles and identities, what we're doing and why we're doing them. And we have to have meaning in everything we're doing. That was Derek Shylove's work. I found it in 2007. And in the UN, Hoffel's team of 25 made this as a list of things that we have to do when we're working out there. We have to develop a sense of safety where we're working and who we're working with. We have to create a calming environment. We have to have self and collective efficacy, self-worth, valuing self. We build connectedness. See how I'm looking at you now? Your faces, I connect with you when I see your eyes. Thanks. I was watching you before and you smiled and I thought, right. And we need to now introduce the words of hope and courage that change can happen. So at the same time, in the same year, 2007, and later on in 2011 with Robert Brooks, I was doing work in Australia in PNG, and this is what I came up with. Now, I found the other two after I'd done this work. The first thing we had to do when we walked into a war zone, a community that's in crisis, and I got called into community, we just had 21 arrests, Judy, can you come? On child sexual assault. Judy, can you come? Safety and security. First thing you have to do, walk from one place to another until you've got the safety. And you know people. When I first went to this particular, they locked us in, we had to go through 2 locked rooms to work, and I said, piss off. If you think I'm going to do that, you've got rocks in your head. They said, where do you want to work? I said, right out in the middle of the community, where anybody can come and sit with us, on blankets, where we worked for nearly 2.5 years after there'd been 21 arrests on child sexual assault. We then start to calm. We rebond. We walk from one place to another to talk to people and get them to talk with each other and hear each other. And we start to build attachment and belonging. The attachment is that I'm seeing your face and I'd like to have a yarn with you later. Story as teacher. Story as healer. Find the stories, bring them out. And justice, fairness and dignity has to be in your mind always. Justice, fairness and dignity. And I value myself, always. And I value you, always. Because together we can make a difference. And we have to use the words of courage and hope. And we make meaning. And that was what Robert and I did. So, I'm just about at the end of this little thing, this gig. Models of practice. Regulate, relate, reason. Oh, right. I've been going very fast, because normally I have an hour. We propose a transformational model designed to provide opportunities for us to work together. You and me. Let's go. Let's do something together. We have to, because we can't do it alone. Because I am 81 years of age, and I've been on the ground doing this work when I first came out of Cape York and realised we had a mess. I worked with the Aboriginal Coordinating Council. Belky Peterson, by the way, was the minister, the Premier. Bob Catter was the minister. And I realised nobody was listening to the kids' stories. So we have to have this transformational learning model. And what we do is we look at everybody and say, you have rights. Let's walk together. I'll respect you for your rights. And we will be responsible together. If we do that, there will be reciprocity. You will teach me. And I will teach you some things too. By the way, I can swear like a trooper when I want to, so I can teach bad things sometimes too. Just remember that. And relatedness. We learn from each other as we work together. Resilience. Do you know what resilience is? Yeah. It's like you have to go for a walk with somebody and you're getting really tired. And you don't think you can keep going, but you've got to listen. So you just keep walking until you hear the full story. And resonance. And honouring the 3 rights determinations, the rights of the child, human rights, Indigenous rights under the UN declarations. I'm finished. Self-care. You've got to look after yourself. This is a group of people sitting around after we'd done some really shitty workshops, and I got the clay out and I said, let's just talk to each other. So we have to have communities of care working with communities of practice, and sometimes we change. We can be the practitioner out there working, and suddenly we're the person who's caring for somebody else that we're working with. So we need to be flexible as we work together. Debriefing, talking together as we do clay work. You know, it's interesting when you do clay work. I'm finished. You actually can't look at the other person because you're busy with your hands. The best thing I've ever found is not to look, is to actually sit and listen. Sometimes with my head down. I'm very good at doing this. And people say, what are you doing, Judy? And it's reminding me to shut my mouth and listen. And when I do take my hand away, it's because I've got something to say. And I never knew what I was doing. How am I going? Okay, I have gone really fast. This PowerPoint is here for you. I have deliberately put some things in there for you to think about. You can have it. Mark? Yeah, rightio. And what I want to do is open a conversation now, very briefly, about your experience of working with kids in crisis. Because I'll tell you what had happened to me. See this hair? I quickly got grey hairs. There was a time I thought the answers were in Canberra. The minister at the time, and do you know what, I've just had a mental blank. It was just before Keating. It was, anyway, I'll think of him in a minute. Got us down to Canberra and asked if we would have a road trip around Australia and listen to what was happening out there and bring it back to Canberra. That was what then influenced the governments in Canberra. I stopped going to Canberra a while ago. So I was given a sound fella and a crew fella to work with me. And we got into a car, and the first place we went to was Tasmania. And the Tasmanian Aboriginal Council said, we need you to meet with this family. So my sound fella and my camera fella walked in, they set themselves up, and there was an old woman about my age now. It was 40 years ago, about 80, and her three daughters were in the room together. See how I'm getting emotional? And they started to talk about the violence that had happened by the girl's father on the mother. And she was sitting beside me, and her chair was just quivering as she was quivering. She couldn't talk at all, but these girls gave me an image of what had happened. Her two sons were in prison because they were following along their father's footprints. Three of her other daughters had died in domestic violence. And I'm looking at my sound fella and my crew, my camera fella, and they're bawling their eyes out. That was my introduction of driving around Australia, funded by the Canberra government, to listen to what was happening in Aboriginal communities about violence. And I'll tell you how long ago that was. As we got back to Melbourne to get into our car to drive, the Melbourne people gave us this little tape deck, and it was Archie Roach. And it was the first time he'd ever recorded. That's how long ago it was. And we drove around Australia, and we sat and we listened in every part of Australia. There are nearly 800 hours of filming in the archives of Aboriginal people talking about violence. I had to condense that into a very small thing. It's called Beyond Violence, Finding the Dream. I can remember trying to edit that down for 3 months and crying and crying and crying, because it was the first time ever somebody had been given a chance to go out into communities and hear their stories. And every place we went to was the site of a massacre. This is the history of this country. We continue to build prisons to put our wounded inside. I spent 5 years, 4 weeks every 6 months, working with Aboriginal women after I retired. It was easy then. I could do some work instead of sitting at a desk and at a university writing stuff. 4 weeks every 6 months with Aboriginal women sentenced to prison. Every single one of them had been through severe domestic violence. And they fought back, which is what women do, Aboriginal women in particular. So we're filling our prisons. The final story I'll tell you was in Queensland, going into Etna Creek Prison. The fellows were from Palm Island, Cherbourg, Morabinda. And we were doing psychodrama. Who does psychodrama in the room? Anybody do psychodrama? It is the best thing I have ever worked with. So I would give them a theme and they would get together and they put their story together and then they would role play it. I'm finishing now. And, oh gosh, I've been going really fast. And it was heavy. I mean, they put this play together and it was the truth of what they lived with from Cherbourg, that mission, that prison mission, Palm Island, that prison mission, Warrabinda, where my family come from, out of the Hornet Bank massacre. And so they were really into it. And next thing, the door burst open up there and 3 screws with their guns came in at them like this. And the fellows froze. These big bully men who were in prison for doing bad things froze. They were terrified. And I looked at these screws and said, am I allowed to swear here? What the fuck do you think you're doing? That was deliberate. In my room when I'm working. Get your guns down and get out of here now. And they went, oh, we thought you were having a riot in here. I said, we were looking at our life stories, the things that brought them to this place, this prison, Etna Creek Prison. Now, if you want to learn something, put your guns in the corner there and join us. Otherwise, just get the hell out of this room. And they kind of put their guns down and then they backed out of the room. And the end of this story is there's this big man from Cherbourg stood there and started to cry. And he said, nobody has ever stuck up for me like that before. That's my final words to you. Are you standing in your integrity for our kids, for our young people, for our people in the prisons, in the juvenile detention centres, on the drugs? Are you standing up for them and speaking out for their needs? Thank you.